it's very important to recognize that all the soft sciences are something that cannot be proven. But what they can do is use qualitative research where you can set the same parameters. And what started as discovery for me with my first research, then when people were saying the same things, the probability goes up. And then like, maybe 4 or 5 years ago now, maybe 5, Sterling Mosley did the same test that I did with a different group of people, and it validated the research that my work did. So that is a proving. But because psychiatry, psychology, and anything that is measuring human nature is considered a soft science. So it has to be qualitative research. And that's why I have the collection of adjectives, the collections of themes. And what a lot of people don't know is that when I started 40 years ago, the lexicon was not there. It was before the books. And I didn't really start my certification work for 9 years. So I taught the Enneagram 9 years before I did the certifications and I did the more formal research. But it didn't matter whether it was the cosmetic industry or where I gave that questionnaire, the results were the same. And the testing instrument has been the same for 40 years. The only thing now is that I've given the new test to 300,000 people, and they haven't all been interviewed. I've interviewed over 100,000 people, but if you look at the test itself, it's 10 tests in one. It's asking people the adjectives they would use to describe themselves to a stranger, and then it's recording what cards are chosen. And I finally found someone that could program it about 8 years ago so that it notifies people if they're using the 9 pattern or the 6 pattern. And it's a very specific pattern because they change their mind as they're going through the test. That's the only way we're going to get to it until scientists agree on the value of qualitative research, which is going up. And to tell you the truth, that's why Naranjo liked my work, because he also did qualitative research when he was at Harvard and Ohio State and Berkeley at the very beginning of trying to understand personality as a separate entity. Or Karen Horney, it was all through observation. So what he liked is it wasn't just my observing people, that I was actually getting them to name for themselves who they were. So I think we'll see it, but I don't think it'll ever be a true false, because there's always going to be variables until we work out all the variables. Very individualistic, just like the tritypes. So, and when you have the type, you have the tritypes and the instincts, already you have almost 1,700 patterns. And the way I serve the test is I make it very personalized. So I give everyone 3 versions of each Enneagram type. Then they need to take those and stack them in the order they relate to. And then as these 10 tests are given to the test taker, they're given their first choice cards against their other first choice cards. And you might think, well, what difference does that make? Well, it means that people that came out 873 might have chosen 3 different cards, not the same cards you chose of 8, 7, and 3. So it gives a whole nother dimension. And the same with the patterns for the instincts. I give it the written words, and I give it the cards on the subtypes. But the other thing that you don't know is that in 1998, so I have 2 university validated tests. And the first one was 1998 with California University at Davis, UC California at Davis. And it registered that there were 4 clusters, and one cluster was all the questions having to do that were pretty much universal. Nobody wanted to be cheated on. Nobody wanted to deal with violence. Nobody wanted their heart broken, everything you can imagine. But then there were 3 other categories that perfectly fit the instincts. So it was statistically important and verifiable, therefore validated, that there were these 3 distinct categories, with one being a catch-all for just universal things that all people want, that weren't indicative of one of these 3 qualities. Naranjo liked that one because it was also qualitative. I asked each subtype what words they'd use, etc. And then it was at the time of Helen Palmer and David Daniels' yearly meeting that we did once a year. And there were like 85 people there. And so the whole weekend was on the instincts. Now, putting it into context, 1998 was still pretty early. There were some people that only recently learned about the subtypes, even though it was in Helen's book. And later in like 96, it was in, Tom's book, I think came out in 96. So there were 2 books that had subtypes, and of course the one I had done. But I wasn't, you kind of had to know me to find it until I started advertising in Enneagram Monthly.